Okay, this video will have a quick look at some of the possible ways of embroidering or decorating your wheel of lace using either knotting or weaving patterns or a combination of the two. In the Alexandra Stillwell book, chapter 4, which starts on page 47, looks at a variety of different patterns that you can use or that you can play with to give you a jumping off point for how to do some of these. I'm just going to look at a couple of them. So I've started with, there are 3 pieces of lace here that are entirely held together, if you will. The lace consists of knotted ends, and there's no weaving. There is the double darning in the very center of each of them. Not much, but just enough to hold the center together. And then all I've done is do a series of knots holding together different aspects of the ends. In some case I've knotted 2 ends together that are a part of a pair, and in some I've knotted across pairs so that we end up with diamonds or triangles or a mix of the same. Also in this one here, I've knotted 4 ends together here instead of just 2. You can knot quite a few ends together, although beyond a certain point, like say more than 6 ends or more than 8 ends together at once, I find it's very difficult to keep the knot from wanting to loosen. And it does depend on your thread. If you're using cotton thread, then, or maybe linen thread, then it would tend to hold, whereas if you're using a slipperier thread like a rayon or possibly a silk, then you might find that the knot just opens again because there's too much pressure trying to hold that many ends together. But you can certainly play with it and make patterns, and this is where it's useful to know the factors for the number of holes or pins in your loom, so that you know that you can group in 6s or 8s or 4s or 3s depending, and make different patterns from row to row. And the other main way of creating patterns is weaving. And so in this case, in these cases, these dense areas are made by weaving the ends, and that's basically under and over, just the way you would on a loom. And sometimes you can go under and over one end, or under and over 2 ends, or a mix. You can go under 1 over 2, under 1 over 2. You have really almost endless, limitless numbers of possible patterns that you can make. Part of the thing that puzzled me when I first started figuring out how to make this lace was, once I wove up to the top of my patch, because I would start down here and weave up, how did I get my thread back down to the bottom? It's often, or if I chose to go across and down, how did I get across? And so on the wrong side, you can see that after I finished weaving out to the edge, I literally just brought my thread down the back of the weaving area, tied it off or looped it under the darning in the center, and then wove up again. If your weaving is loose enough, you can actually hide your thread inside the weaving, but there has to be quite a bit of room. In this case here, I was able to hide the thread inside the weaving, but here with the red threads, I ended up just bringing them down to the center at the back of the weaving. This is just a mix of weaving and knotting, and just to show you that you can use different colors. Like, you don't have to weave with the same thread all the time. You can use different colors, and in fact there are so many things that you can play with, so many elements of color that you can play with. In this piece here, I chose to make different color patterns in when I warped the loom or set the web. So I used green and blue and yellow. But in other cases, I chose to keep the warp one color and use different colors for the weft. And of course, you can also use variegated thread, which will do something else again for you. Or you can change color partway through, as I did here, where I wove blue and then chose to jump to red and weave in red. Now I wanted to show you a pattern that I decided that with this pattern there was so much possibility of my threads showing in these little spaces here that I definitely wanted to make sure that I could bring my thread through the weaving to the new place where I wanted to start. So I've gone most of the way around, but I have, I'm just going to turn it the way I was working, I have just a few left to go, so I'll just move that there. Okay, so there we go. So my next square is going to go across these two ends and these two ends, and I'm just going to weave over and under. I'm starting here and I'm just going to weave, well, over and under and over. And I'll just do a few passes back and forth to make this little square of weaving. Under the first pair and over the second pair. I just turn it around to make it easier, so I'm always putting my needle in the same way. You don't have to do that if you're able to use your other hand or do it backwards. That's totally up to you. Okay, I'm almost there, just another couple of passes. Almost. Okay, I think that should do it. So I'll push this square up. So now I've finished this little square and it's alternated with that little square. And now I want the next square that I want to do, well, Jess, I see I miscalculated. Okay. But I can show you what I wanted to show you, which is if I was going to start working down here for my next square, imagine it were that one, then I would put my thread inside this column of stitches and pull it through. And it's hidden, and you won't be able to see it on either side. That's an end from before. So I wanted to just show you that little trick of hiding your thread inside the weaving, but you do have to sort of plan for it and not make your weaving too tight, so that you can actually get a needle. And it does depend on how thick your needle is. This is actually a finer needle than the one I'm planning to give you. It's harder with the needles I'm going to be giving you, but you may have a slightly finer needle that you can use if you determine to do a pattern where you need to hide your threads inside the weaving. Okay, so I'll leave you to it with all the possibilities of color and texture and weaving and knotting and pairing and quadrupling and all the other things that you can play with to make patterns on these looms. The next video will show you how to take your lace off the loom and reveal its beauty on the right side.